really can never tire of really repeating this. It's the following point. When we say hashkafa is a very vague term. It's really a vague term in a certain sense. To most people, hashkafa can mean anything, a dozen things, really. To me, hashkafa can mean medrash and shah. The medrash, for example, hashkafa can mean agarata and shah. Hashkafa can mean musasvom. Hashkafa can mean ruchim. Hashkafa can mean the zoya. I mean, hashkafa is a very wide range term that can apply to many different types of limudim. So when different people say hashkafa, generally different people mean different things. We define it in a certain very specific way, and that's what makes the difference between what we do and essentially what I guess most other people do. And after the message, you will understand this even much more, even deeper in this sense. The general way of learning hashkafa, no matter how you define it, is fragmented. For example, most time a person will learn the Seder of the week. They learn Rashi, they learn the Ramban, they learn the Meforshim, the Malbim and so on. They get an idea of what's going on in this period, what's going on in this Maisa, what's going on with the Akedis Yitzchak, a vote on something that's going on with the with anything, with the Chet of the Mishin, something about Noach, and then something about Yosef. Each Seder essentially has its own concepts and so on, and it's a fairly fragmented approach. It's fragmented. Stuff is mostly fragmented in its presentation. If you ask someone the ultimate objective of stuff, it's to understand this might of the others, to understand what happened in Jewish history, to understand the Musa, Hashkafa, what it means to be an Elachiyid, and so on and so forth. The way we attempt to do is to understand Hashkafa in a certain term. Hashkafa essentially is the understanding of the Hashkafa of the Bria itself. It's an understanding of certain basic questions. You see, the basic questions that we want to understand is the following. We want to understand, first of all, what can we understand about the Baruch Shem himself? What's Shaykh to Al Havana? Number one. Number two, what we want to understand also is why did he create the world? You see, what was the necessity? Number three, along with that, what is the tachlis of the Bria? What is the purpose of it? Number four, what is the composition of the world? What is it made of? For example, who inhabits the world? People inhabit it, animals and so on. There are, there's galaxies and there's stars and there's stellar objects and many things and so on. There are also something we know, there are malochim, there's shadim, there's the hecholos. I mean, there are many expressions that are used, there are many things. What are all these things? And shadim, there's the sitra achra, there's the sultan, and who and what are all these different things, and what is the purpose? That's another thing we want to understand. Number four, we want to understand why was man created, an Adam, and what essentially is his tachlis? What is the tachlis of man? Why was man created? Number four, what is the construction of man? He has a Yetzer and Yetzer Tov. What is the Yetzer Hara? What really is the Yetzer Tov? Why was man given the Torah? What does the Baruch Shem want from a person? All these questions are extremely fundamental, and many people tackle it and so on, and these are some of the things we want to answer. But we even go much further than that. And what we do is we attempt to also understand the current day reality. Why does the world look the way it does? We want to say, what is the meaning of Mashiach? Who and what is the Mashiach supposed to do? Why is there an individual Mashiach? What is the meaning of Olam Haba? We want to say, why does the world look the way it does? What is the difference between a Jew and a Goy? Is this the way it's supposed to be? What is the Jew really? Was Noach a Jew? Was Adam a Jew? Was he a Goy? Who really was he? Why are the Goyim? Why is it that the Goyim are the supreme in the world? They are the strongest, and the Yidden are always the biggest shafal. We want to understand, why do the Goyim have such incredible chokhmah? And the Jews are essentially, in terms of many things, they're very shifristic and so on. Why is there suffering in the world? Why is there so much source? And the fact, why do the Yidden suffer so much? And we even want to go into questions of the World War II, the Holocaust. Is there any kind of sense or rhyme or reason that is possible in such an incredible catastrophe? What is the nature of that? What is the whole Indian of Eretz Yisrael that's going on there? Why did the Jews get Eretz Yisrael back 2,000 years later? What is the purpose of that for? Why are we so much connected to the land and so on? There are many questions that we really would like to answer. But as we really can see, All these questions relate to the Hashgacha Pratis. The Rebbeinu created the world with a certain tachlis, and He guides it in a certain way to reach a certain end. This is very clear, essentially what the Torah says. Fill in the details. Why does He make it? Where is it going to? How does He guide it? Is it possible for us to understand all these things? That essentially is the understanding of the Hashgacha. That's what I consider to be Hashgacha. Everything else, the Medrash, the Agarata, or Kabbalah, all these things are nothing more than resource materials which we attempt to understand in order to answer these questions. It is these questions and the structure or the binyan, you see, the edifice, which holds everything together is really what we want to understand. You see, we want to answer these questions on our own, using this material. Hashgacha is not the exclusive study of a set of the Parsha of the week. It's not the specific study of Kabbalah. It's not the study of Musa. It's not the study, what do you call it, of Agarat and Shas, or the Yakmei Amloez, or the Atzkol, the Psalm. That's not what Hashgacha is. Hashgacha is really an understanding to, what we want to do is to understand the Darkei Hashem, the Derech Hashem. What does the Rebbeinu do? How does He run His world, and why does He run it? And we want to understand that to the highest level that we can, to whatever shayach. You see, how high can we go in this understanding? And if we can't get any going higher, why can't we go higher? Why are we limited? We want to understand this in terms of the, like I say, the conceptual binyan. There's a conceptual edifice that we want to develop. We will use all this material to essentially develop a lot of these ideas. Now, as I mentioned also, like one of the main forms that I use, the main people Chachamim that I use to build the system is Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto. I spoke to the group. I consider his understanding. I'm not going to go too much into the Ramchal at this point, but Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, who wrote the Mesilas Yesharim, I think is the Derech Hashem, Das Funas. To me, he presented a conceptual edifice or a system which is very profound, extremely profound, and I believe it's based on essentially on the Kabbalah Sa'ari. It's based on a chokhmah which most people don't know. His form are very difficult to learn, the Chlal, for many different reasons. But an understanding of his form, together with many other sources together, can yield, I believe, answers to many questions. For the last few months, we have attempted to answer a lot of these different questions. We have on the production here the taste. So hopefully we'll get them as soon as we can. It's an important project. But until then, what I want to do was to review more rapidly what we have learned. And I'm going to probably want to review for the next 2 or 3 weeks. I'm going to run a little slower because I see we have quite a number of new people here. I'm going to run the review. And essentially, the understanding of the Hashgacha also is not necessarily an intellectual achievement, and this is a very critical item which people who come to the Shia realize after a period of time. We're not dealing simply with an understanding of these issues, but what we're dealing with is an understanding in such a way where you begin to feel what's going on. When you walk out of here, if you haven't experienced something different, then I have either failed to deliver what I wanted to deliver, or else it just hasn't, in some way it wasn't really picked up in the way that I think would have been adequate in some way. Because you will notice over time that a lot of these concepts are just more than understanding themselves. Once you understand them, they deliver a certain kind of, almost a certain kind of feeling in a sense. And this is something also which is part of the work itself. So we're going to start now the review of it, but essentially again, what we're attempting to do is understand the Hashgacha itself, some of the fundamental problems and connections of the Hashgacha in a cohesive, structured framework. The first thing that we dealt with is what can we understand about the nature of the Rebbeinu Shalom himself. Now, that's not an easy parsha in terms of this. And what I think we're going to do tonight is to talk quickly about some of the main concepts about the Rebbeinu himself. Because unless you understand certain things about the Rebbeinu, the truth is you can never understand what is going on in the Bria. And it sounds strange because no one starts with that really. Most people, do not start with this kind of thing. But if you really want to understand the essential bachir of a person, or what the tachas ha'adam, you must understand something about the Baruch Shem himself. So let's talk about the Baruch Shem. The first thing that basically we have to understand is that the Baruch Shem is very different than everyone else. It's very different than us in a certain specific thing. And I'm not going to develop it. I'm just going to make these really as a series of statements. The Baruch Shem created the world. He created everything else. We are nivroim, essentially. He himself is a bird. Now, there are many questions which are asked instantly when you look at this tool. One of the fundamental questions that we ask is, where did we come from? We were created by the Baruch Shem. The question that also is asked, but the thing is, what about him? Where did he start from? That's one question that's essentially the fundamental question, and it's based on a certain premise that existence comes into being. The way we understand something which exists is that it comes into being. It's not necessarily there. So when we understand the Baruch Shem, we have a concept in our minds, and we say, well, okay, how did it start before? Where did it start with him? You see, in that kind of. So this is one of the questions that we dealt with, and this is number one. And the answer to this question, the way we defined it, was in the following way: that we distinguish between certain basic ideas. We distinguish between the notion of something which exists. Everything in the world which we see can be defined in a certain way. It can be understood in certain terms. And the term that is understood is its definition. For example, a tape recorder. A tape recorder, for example, is a device which can reproduce sound. Those are the characteristics which define it. A light. Anything which is on there, anything in the room, everything which in the world has a certain definition to it. If you want to understand it, we understand it by its characteristics. And we call that an essence, and so on. Now, that which we understand exists, but the existence of something is secondary to its essence. This something called the existence of something is the fact that it is, and its definition is the way it is, or the particular way it is or it exists. And each thing exists in a different way because each thing is very different. And the fundamental idea that we said was that we think of the Baruch Shem in those terms, but the truth of the matter is that the Baruch Shem is not a being which exists, really. He's not a being which exists, in the sense that we know that. Because when we think of the Baruch Shem God, we think of the following things. We think of, let's see, well, he's the smartest of all, he's omniscient, he knows everything. He's omnipotent, he's all-powerful, he's omnipresent, he's all over, like he has contact with everything and he knows everything. These are his characteristics. And we think of him, we merge these characteristics and we have the idea of God, essentially. And we say that this idea of an omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent being exists. So we separate the idea of the Baruch Shem, or the characteristics of the Baruch Shem, from his essence. I'm sorry, which is his essence, from his existence. But the truth of the matter is that it's a very different thing. The Baruch Shem is very different, because the Baruch Shem does not exist like we do. He doesn't possess existence. All of us is defined in certain characteristics. And we all possess existence. That's what we are. The Baruch Shem does not possess existence in that way. Rather, the Baruch Shem is existence itself. And this was a very difficult thing in the beginning to understand. And I don't expect you people to really catch this right at this point. But normally when we think of the world, we think of an item or a thing. We understand what it's made of, its characteristics, and we understand that it is. In the case of the Baruch Shem is the existence itself. That is fundamentally what he is. He is the entity called existence. Now that's a very difficult thing to understand itself, and the only way we really can understand it is we think of different things, and then we try and understand just the word, the idea, existence, being, to be. Think of that in your head for a minute, just the notion of to be or existence, being. You see, that concept is the Baruch Shem. He is the very aspect of existence itself. Now, that's not an easy thing to get, in that kind of sense. So therefore, he is the fiber of existence itself, whatever that is, being, to be. He is that. So therefore, since the Baruch Shem is existence itself, he is the very aspect of existence itself, he he could never been brought into being. Nobody could create him. Because you cannot bring existence into existence. You see, existence is. If you think of existence, if you think of something is, the fact that something is, you can't bring that into being. Because by its very definition, it's there. That's what it means. And since the Banishim is pure existence itself, he was always there. That is him. He is existence itself. He doesn't possess it like anything else in the world. He is the thing. So therefore he was always there. I don't know, am I clear to some of the new people listening? I'm going somewhat rapidly on that. And it's not an easy thing to grab. It's one of the most difficult things to grab, really. At least conceptually. It takes a long time to grab that. Because what it is, the mind, when the mind thinks of the world and many ideas, the mind always connects the essence or the definition of something with the fact that it is, and it merges the two, and it can't separate it. It's very hard for us to think of pure existence itself without being attached to anything. Every time we think of existence, we always think of something which exists. And it's hard for us to think of the concept of existence in and of itself, not necessarily something which exists. And the best way to do it is to think of something which exists and then separate whatever that something is from the notion that it is. And what you have to do is take that notion of it is, that is the Ribono Shel Olam. The it is part. What? I'm saying this very rapidly, and on an intellectual level you can understand what I'm saying. You see. So therefore, normally, the way we understand things, and I don't expect, and like that's one of the unfortunate things about a Chazorah, when you have new people on a Chazorah. It's not an easy thing, it takes time. I worked through this whole concept for about 2 hours. You see, so for you people to grab it in 5 minutes is not easy. But just to make this concept a little clearer, let me make this concept a little clearer. Look, let me explain something. There are certain concepts you will not be able to understand probably at this point. Most of the concepts you will. I'm just saying it just to give you at least an intellectual understanding. If you have any problem later on, we could maybe go into more detail in terms of that. Everything which exists, right, has what's called an essence, or in Hebrew, you know what the word in Hebrew is? Mahus. I don't know if you know the word in Hebrew, okay? The Hebrew word is Mahus. It comes from the word Mahu. What is the Mahus of something? The Mahus is the definition of it. You look up in Webster's dictionary, Webster's dictionary attempts to give you the definition of everything. It attempts to explain what it is. How does it do it? By telling you its major characteristics, its features. You see, its basic descriptive features. That's what tells you what it is. That's how you understand it. That's called an essence. You see. Now, all these things which are also exist. Now, these are two separate ideas. You see, they're separate ideas. For example, in the 16th century, was there anything called a tape recorder? Were there any tape recorders in the 16th century? No. What is the definition of a tape recorder? It's a device or an object which has the capacity through electronic principles to reproduce sound. That's the basic definition of a tape recorder, correct? Was there a tape recorder in the 16th century? Did anything ever exist in the 16th century? No. But the idea, if you went back in time and you told a 16th century person what a tape recorder is, could he understand what it is? Yes, he could understand the idea. And he says, I've never seen the thing, I don't know what it is, I've never seen it, but I can understand the idea of what such a thing is, correct? That's what an essence is. An essence is the idea of something. Does it have to exist? No. It doesn't have to actually be in reality. You see what I'm saying? For example, a fairy. The fairy godmother, which they use in fantasy, you know? Does a fairy exist? No, it's something out of Grimm's fairy tales. Right? There's no such thing, or a witch is something else. But, no, a witch does exist, a machashefa. That's different, although their concept is different. But for example, let's see...
leprechaun.
What? A leprechaun. A leprechaun, excellent. A leprechaun. I don't know if you know, a leprechaun is a very tiny, a small person, a miniature person, who's capable of doing magical things. The legend starts in Ireland. Okay, leprechaun. Now, and they have super basic features. I think they have tails or something like that. Has anyone ever seen a leprechaun? No. When I say the word leprechaun, do you understand what I'm talking about? Yes. Well, why? You've never seen it. It doesn't exist anywhere. So what is it that you're holding? What are you taking? The answer is... Yeah. Go through? Okay. The answer is what you're understanding is the mahut, or the idea of the thing. You understand the essence of the mahut of it, although it doesn't exist. Now, suddenly, if you actually see a leprechaun walking along, suddenly you realize that this essence or this idea really exists, you see. But existence is something which is added to the essence. The essence is simply what the concept is, what the characteristics are that make it to be what it is. But it doesn't have to be, you see. So therefore, existence, which is Havaya, right, is different than Mahut. Do we understand this essentially clearly? Now everything in the world submits to this formula. There is nothing in the entire Bria, from here, from the netherworld, all the way up to the highest Malachim, that do not submit to this formula. Mechoel HaMalach. You see, for example, if you want to say Mechoel, now, Mechoel is Malach. Okay, who is Mechoel, for example? Mechoel is a certain type of Malach. He's an individual. Mechoel is different in Gabriel. How is he different? He has different koichas. He has different different koichas. He has different different talents. There are many different things. He has a different aspect to him. So that you can understand Mechoel is different than Gabriel. I'm talking about Malachim now, or whatever it's called. There's a different Mahut. But Mechoel exists, and so does Gabriel. So everything submits to that. And that's essentially what the Banashim did. How did the Banashim create the world? He first created essences, and he gave them all existence. He smacked the two together. That's what he did. He put the two together. Now, what about the Banashim himself? You see, when we understand the Banashim, we understand it in the same way that you understand someone else. For example, we understand the Banashim also has an essence. There's an idea which defines him. What is God? Well, you see, God is a being, number one, who's all-knowing, all-powerful, all-present. These are characteristics of him, in that sense. So he has an essence, and the Banashim exists. He has Havaya. That's the way everyone understands him, you see. But that's not true of him. He does not submit to this, because this formula is only true of things which are created. What is the Banashim then? The Banashim is this. This is his Mahut, not that. If you say fundamentally, what is the Banashim? The Banashim is being. That's all. Nothing more. That's what he is. He is pure being, or pure existence. Now, can we understand that? No. We don't. Because we have never met something which is pure being. We only know an essence or something which is defined in a certain way, which then has existence. We cannot understand what a being is like, who is pure being itself. That is his essence. The central thing, characteristic of the Banashim, is the fact that he is, not that he possesses existence, but existence itself, that thing which is called existence or being, is him.
Does that mean he lacks essence?
What? No, it means that these two are merged. His essence is existence. Existence is part of his essence. So therefore, he must be. He must be. Since he is existence itself, he has to be. That is one of the features of him. He possesses this thing called pure existence. Do you understand what I'm kind of saying? Only at this point you understand it intellectually. There's a way to understand it on a more emotional and profound experiential level, but that's not, you won't get that in 5 minutes. You won't get that in 5 minutes. But you see what I'm saying? Since he is this, nobody could create him. Why? Can you create existence? With the way, it's ridiculous. You can't create existence. You can't bring existence into existence. Does that make sense? You see what I'm saying? Can you give existence to being or to existence? No. Existence means that it is. That's the fundamental definition. It is. And since he is this, he always was. Like I say, fundamentally there's this, you can only understand this intellectually at this point. But, later on, if when on the page you can understand it better from experiential. But that's essentially what it is. So therefore the Banashim is very different than anything else we know. Essentially, he is pure existence itself. And the way to understand it, when you go home at night, try and think of existence itself, being. Don't think of something that is, but try and think of the isness, the is part of the word itself. The Banashim is an isness. The same thing. That's why the expression that God is, right, is a false expression. You see, because this implies that there's a noun or a subject, right, which possesses existence. Our language, right? If you analyze a sentence is composed of a noun, a shem, and a poel, and a verb, right? That's how we see this, a sound and a verb. For example, if I say he is, or I say Reuven is. Reuven is the essence. That's the sentence. But can you describe something which is itself? God is not. The Bonisham is not is. He is this. This is him. Erase this word. This is that. That's what he is. What is that? We cannot understand that. That's what his Messiah is. He is the verb part of the sentence and the noun part all merged together. So therefore, what I said last week very clearly is that we have no idea of what that kind of being is. We cannot describe it. You see. And what I said before, the very fact that you could be mispalo is the moedi chesed that the Baruch Hashem is doing you a favor. Because like I said also, we think that when we daven and we say the Baruch Hashem, Melech Machem, Nochem, the Baruch Hashem, he's this, he's Kila, Godla, no, we think that we're doing him a tov in some way, that we're ascribing to him shvachim. We're giving him praise. The answer is, we're not saying anything. What we're saying are absolute lies about him. Because the Baruch Hashem is not great, you see. He's not smart, all these things. He doesn't possess these things as features or characteristics out of him. He is these things. He and these things are all one. You see. That's not an easy thing to understand. But fundamentally, that's what he is, you see. He is the verb itself, is. Now like I said, we have no understanding of this thing.
So why don't we start Hagad or Hagibar?
Because the thing is, because the Baruch Hashem is giving us reshus. You see. He's giving us reshus to attempt to describe him, there's two things. First of all, he's giving us reshus to say something about him, number one. Because the only thing that you can say about the Baruch Hashem, I want to say this, but I'm not going to go into why. There's only one emes of shevach that you can give to the Baruch Hashem. Only one. And there is no other. And remember what that shevach is? I would say the shevach right now. That's it. You cannot say anything about him. Because we cannot understand him. He is so far beyond our understanding. The nature of his being is so far beyond. There's nothing you can say. So therefore, the only shevach you can say is not to say anything. And by that, you're being moided that there's nothing to say. That's how wide he is. My thoughts are not your thoughts. That's what the Baruch Hashem says. So I'm not someone that can be understood. So therefore, the Baruch Hashem gives you a shus to describe him, and he gives you a shus to describe him in a certain way, you see, which is the top level of your understanding. You see, for example, it's like trying to say, I can reach for the stars if I can just touch the ceiling. So the Baruch Hashem says, it's mutter you to touch the ceiling, and I'll consider if you make an effort to touch the ceiling, I'll consider it as if you attempted to touch the stars. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because that's all you can do. It's not possible for you to do any more.
Language.
What? He's letting you talk. He's letting you describe in your thinking. What's that? But it's in your terms, the way you can understand, he's letting you describe him. But he has no shaykhs to these characteristics, really. He's far beyond them. Now, just like we cannot understand them, nobody can understand them. The highest of the beings, the greatest beings in the world, Malachim, or even the highest Malachim, the highest Malachim is the Sa'aponim. Okay, the Sa'aponim. He's very high. I mean, he's very high in a sense. He's very high. I mean, his ruchnis is staggering in terms of what the Sa'aponim. He has a name. You're not supposed to say the names of Malachim. The short name is Matat. But he's the highest of all malachim. He has no shaykhs to understand the Baruch Hashem. He has as much shaykhs to understand you as you have to understand. He has as much shaykhs to understand the Baruch Hashem as you have to understand the Baruch Hashem. Now that's staggering. How can a malach have no shaykhs to understand the Baruch Hashem? Because a malach is also nothing but an essence plus an existence. So what shaykhs does this kind of a being have to understand something which is itself? was not even a noun.
The fact that there's more looking at them does give them more power to understand.
No shots. Do you understand what I'm saying? Could they know it?
Could you say if you never reach the top, almost isn't reaching?
What?
Let's say you try to reach the top of a mountain. If you only get up to the halfway level or to the 3/4 level, you still never reach it.
No.
You never attain
No. For example, you could never get. Could you go back Could you go back a minute into time? Could you go back? No. You can't. That's how the Baruch Hashem is unreachable, through the same unreachableness. Well, I'll give you another example. For example, you're a person. You have certain sickness and so on and so forth. Okay. If I take a chimpanzee, I put a chimpanzee, could that chimpanzee understand you, what you are, in his mind? You think he can understand what an Adam is, what a person is? No. If I take a shark, can a shark understand what a chimpanzee is? And if I take a water bug, can a water bug be told what an Adam is? You see what I'm talking about? And if I take a virus, can you explain to a virus what a water bug looks like? What it is? Or bacteria, or paramecium, an amoeba. You understand what I'm saying? What I'm saying is that the Metzias, or the being of these things, is so different from other. There's no way, there's no mechanism, there's no way to breach. It's a gap which is unbreachable, you see. So therefore, the thing that you cannot understand the Baruch Hashem. No one can understand nobody can understand the Baruch Hashem, because the gap that separates the Bari from the Nivra is a gap which can never be traversed forever by anyone. Because to understand the Baruch Hashem, you have to be the Baruch Hashem. You have to be that kind of a Messiah. Okay? That's it.
You said that shows that the right
I say the only thing the Sarapani has over us is that with his staggering intellect, he understands more why he doesn't understand.
Yes, right. You can understand the Ratzon of Ashkocha much deeper. And you can also understand, you're right.
But he understands better why he doesn't understand what the answer is.
Yes, right. Yeah, in that sense it's correct. You find it's
I mean, I don't understand what's wrong to say, if you would say that the Brahma has an essence. He's also an essence that exists. What's the speed to that?
Why is that wrong? Because
it?
as soon as you see that, the immediate question is, who made him?
Who created the essence?
Who made it?
The essence is somebody would have to create it.
Yes, because the essence doesn't have to be. Doesn't have to be. You know what I mean? Where did he come from? That's why people ask that question. Who made God? The question is, well, someone made me. Who made me? The Baruch Hashem. Fine. Who made God? And the question is a legitimate question. So the answer is, nobody made God. Why? How could nobody make God? There's a cause. Everything has a cause and effect. What is the cause of God? So the simple answer is, you can't ask such a question. That's the end. But you see, the 2-3 question, you can't answer that question. Yes, you can answer that question. Because you have to understand what the nature of the question is. As long as you think of the Baruch Hashem in terms of this formula, then you're about to say, well, who made it? You see. Who invented the tape recorder? There was a point in time there was no tape recorder. You see. Who invented it? Who brought this idea into being? You see. Who brought the idea of God into being? You see, so, if you see it in terms of this, you can say, who brought this idea into being? The being and the idea are two separate things. You see. But if I see the Baruch Hashem is not an idea which has being, the idea of the Baruch Hashem itself is being. You see. So no one made him, because you cannot create existence. Existence by its definition is.
But still, the reason why everybody says we're too mistaken is because, according to popular theory, everything has to be able to be brought under scientific analysis. If you can't, then what you remain with is faith. To say that there's such a thing that you can't understand is a matter of faith. Because everything is supposed to have logic, it's supposed to have a scientific ground.
There are things that cannot be understood. It's not so. Even in science. For example, the exclusion principle. Are you familiar with that? Okay, in physics, when you have a particle movement, a certain particle which is moving, you cannot know its position of that particle and its velocity. at the same time. You can either know its position, I'm not the exclusion, I'm saying the uncertainty principle. Either you know where it is or how fast it's going. You cannot know both. It's not sharp to know both. That's quantum physics, quantum theory. Quantum theory has introduced a whole new slew of things that you cannot know. Period. So it's not so simple. Even science has this kind of concept. But the thing is, we want to understand why we can't know. You see, why can't we know that? The answer is because the Buddhism is pure existence itself. And that's essentially what it is. And with that, we'll kind of leave that. If it goes on, we developed the idea more and so on. But I'm going, what?
No, it was the second.
I don't want to go to the second step. You know? There's a higher step even beyond that. Upanishad is not even this, but I won't even go into that. Okay? I mean, you have to first be holding one way and then the other. So let's go on.
Can I make a point to this question? The fact is that if you know that the Renaissance exists because of the Nidra, the Goyim, and that many proofs that there is a Mitzvah about it, so we don't understand it. That doesn't mean it's not scientific. It's not everything, like your point, not everything to understand. As long as you know from the Nidra.
For one thing, what is important, we should try and understand why we can't understand that. That itself is a level of yishur. That itself is a level of understanding. To understand why we cannot know something. Because it tells me something about the nature of the reality I'm dealing with. Of why I can't understand that reality. You see? Okay. Now, the Buddhism does not expect you to understand who he is. But there is one thing that he does expect. Not only expects it, he demands it. And he demands it in such a way that it is your very tachos. It is the central tachos of the entire Bria itself. To understand what this is. And what is it that he expects you to understand? What he expects you to understand is the following. He expects you to understand his yichud. In other words, what he expects you to understand is what does it mean when it says Hashem. Now, what am I talking about? It sounds like, well, I say it every day. Shema Yisrael Hashem Lekei Hashem Echad. What's the big deal? You know, I understand there's only one God, right? Right? Okay. It's not as simple as that. There are many implications to that. And fundamentally, the question that I once started off asking is the following question. You see this chair here, right? I don't think there's another chair in all the entire universe that looks like it. I mean, I'm pretty safe to say that there's not, in all the creation, there's nothing that looks like this chair. I would be safe to say, right? I mean, it has a very unusual design. Is correct? Now, let us call this chair, let's give it a name. Okay, let's give it a name. Let us call it the Queen chair, the Queen Anne chair. Okay, let's call that. Now, there is only one. Now, I ask you this following question: how many Queen Anne chairs are there in the entire universe? What's the answer? One. Right? Is that true? There's only one. I will ask you another question: how many gods are there? One. Right? Is that saying the same thing? There is one Queen Anne chair. There is one Bonashon, one God, one Eloika. Is that saying the same thing? For the new guys. I mean, the old guys probably can handle it. Is that the same thing? It sounds like the same thing, doesn't it? The same statement? No. The difference is the following. Is it possible for there to be another Queen Anne chair? Yes. If some crazy guy comes and designs a Zalazar, there could be another one. Could there be another Bonashon? No. That is the difference. In other words, when I say there is one chair, it doesn't exclude the possibility of another. When I say there's one God, it means there cannot be another. You see the difference? Now, why? You see, why? Well, the truth of the matter is we come back to the same thing we said before. The answer is the following: why there cannot be another God, but there can be another chair. For the following reason: this chair has a certain essence, right? It's an idea, right? If I say, what is this thing? So you say, well, what is the Queen Anne chair? So you say, well, a Queen Anne chair, first of all, it's a chair. What is a chair? A chair is a certain object designed in a certain specific way so that a person can repose. Okay, that's the definition. That's the idea of a chair, right? What is a Queen Anne chair? A Queen Anne chair is a chair. It has the idea of chair, but in addition, it's designed in a certain way where it's got A, B, C, D, E. It's, that's the design of it.
Features.
Certain features. That's the Queen Anne chair, right? That's its essence. Now, could there be two of these? Yes. Because you have one idea, they can have any number of representations. But you can duplicate the essence, right? But let's take the Bnei Shalom. Okay? What is the fundamental definition of the Bnei Shalom? Existence. Can you have two existences? You can have two types of existence. You see, you can have, when I mean two types, you can say you can have two things which exist. But the pure notion of the pure idea of existence itself, can there be two of it? No. Existence is this. Existence is. There's only one is. There's only one thing. Do you understand what I'm saying? If you are existence itself, you can't have another one. You have what I'm saying? You have?
Yeah, somebody beats you to it.
It's not someone beats you to it. Someone grab the patent on this one. It's not,
I imagine that.
but it's not someone beats you. But if you are existence itself, it's not someone that punish him, beat you to it and so on. That kind of thing, that kind of character feature permits no other. Because existence simply means to be. And if you are, you are. If you are not, you are not. That's it. The only possibility is either you are or you are not. You see, you can't be are. There can be two different types of are. You see what I'm saying? You know what I mean? You can't exist. You can be two different types of objects. You see, you can have this exists, that exists. You see, they're two different things. But their existence, the existence which they possess, or the fact that they are, is the same thing. Do you understand what I'm saying? They both have whatever's called existence, the fact that they are, that they're being, it's the same thing that they both have, except that they both express it differently. You see, every object in the world expresses its existence in a different way. That's how we can distinguish these things. But the thing which they all possess in common is the fact that they all are. And that's the same thing with all of them. That thing called existence, which they all share, and what they all have is the same among all of them. They each have it in a different way. They express it in a different way. But they all have the same thing called existence. You see what I'm saying? Now, if the Bnei Shalom is existence itself, there is only one type of that thing. And that's it. There is no other type. Existence simply means to be. Either you are or you are not. If you are, you are. Could there be two different types of ares? You know, I didn't say two different types of objects which are. Two different types of ares. You understand what I'm saying? It can't be.
Because we're the one.
I don't know. Am I getting across? It's not. I realize. I just want to. How come I'm getting across to the? Am I getting across to the? Am I getting across? Can we know that? I'm not. I mean, to some degree, am I getting across? All right. So therefore, because the Bnei Shalom is existence itself, I bet you people get it. It's amazing. You work. It's a subtle kind. It's going to take you if you hold on it. You have to listen to the tape. It's going to take you a week to 2 weeks to get it. I'm telling you. And when you get it, you're going to come back and you're going to say, "I have it." That's what it is. You know, it's like it's something which is elusive because it's more than it's an experience. Once you grab it, you will know that you have it. It's, but you have to work on it. It's nothing.
What is the extent?
It's attainable. All right. Other people claim that they and that kind of thing. So therefore, the Bnei Shalom is one. The Bnei Shalom, very quickly, the Bnei Shalom is one. You see, there cannot be another one. You see. Now we get simpler. Okay, these were the heaviest concepts that were introduced tonight, essentially. Well, that's it. These are very difficult ideas, I grant you. I know. Now we're going to get much simpler. What does it mean to say that? We understand what it means. So therefore, the Bnei Shalom is one. Hashem Echad. There cannot be another God, because He is pure existence itself. So therefore, there cannot be another existence as such. So therefore, we have the concept of what's called Yichud Metziasai. Right? Metzias means being. We understand, at least to the best we can, the notion of the oneness or the unity of his being. Yichud Metziasai means that there's only one Rebbeinu Shalom. There's only one thing that can exist and be a God. That's called Yichud Metziasai. Okay? everything else must take its existence in some way from him, because he is the thing itself. He's the one that has the thing, so therefore he's the only one that gives it out, in whatever way he gives it out. Okay, now, if the Bnei Shalom is pure existence itself, and nothing exists outside of him, right? Everything must come from him, correct? So therefore, he must have absolute control, total power. That's called Yichud Shlitasai. Shlita means dominion or control. You see? You understand what I'm saying? Why is the Bnei Shalom the most powerful being of all? Why is it that he controls everything? Nothing controls him. He doesn't need anything else. Everything needs him. That's what means Shlita. You know, for example, Shlita is used by a melech, a king, right? The Caesar of Rome. The Caesar of Rome, Julius Caesar was a very powerful emperor, and the emperors of Rome were absolute monarchs. Or even better, probably even greater absolute monarch of Rome. How to say, the old Egyptian pharaohs of the old kingdom. Say he was, probably they were even bigger. Because they were looked at as gods. A king who, let's say, the Caesar of Rome is an absolute monarch. What does it mean, an absolute monarch? It means, when I say, what does an absolute monarch mean? An absolute king means, very following, I have power. What do you mean power? It means I say, go do this. You must do this. I have the power. I can enforce my power. You see, that's what Shlita is. Shlita means that I can determine what happens. That's Shlita. Now, the Bnei Shalom has the Bnei Shalom has the two things. The Bnei Shalom is the only one which is possessed with power. That's the end of him. That's the end of his absolute power. You see, but the Bnei Shalom has absolute power. You see, why? Because he gives existence to everything. He is pure existence itself. So nothing is above him and nothing is beyond him. You see, in order for something to come into being, they have to come onto him. You see, if they have to come onto him, he controls everything. So he has therefore absolute control of reality. There's nothing that can transpire. Absolutely nothing. You realize what this means in a second. You cannot, for example, you're sitting there, you cannot lift your finger or twitch your eyelid without the Bnei Shalom saying, a maskim. It's not possible. You cannot have a thought that goes in your head, you know, without him saying, I'm maskim. Why? Because everything which exists takes its existence from him. Every movement, every nuance, every nakuda, every point, every dot, you see, takes its existence from him. It was brought into being. Therefore, it exists by his consent. You see what I'm saying? That is absolute control.
So in other words, there's no use in asking why would the Eibush interest himself in my lifting my finger?
No, that's another question. We'll get that.
Why would he interest himself in such little?
That is a good question.
Existence is itself. That's so
no. All we simply know is what we're simply saying is you cannot move your finger without him being masculine. But you're asking an additional question, which is a very valid question. Why does the Bnei Shalom care whether I lift my finger or not? The answer is obviously he must care. Why? Because you need him to do it. So therefore, obviously, he's concerned with every point of the Bria. Now, why? Why is he concerned with every point of the Bria? That is a good question. Put that aside. That has to do with Tachlis and Bria itself.
And why does he use Malachim to do certain shlichus?
Okay, that's another question. Right, so he could do right. Okay, that's another very valid question. But the central point is that Yichud Shlutasai comes out of Yichud Mitziyosai. You see, since he is, and everything must come on to his existence, or his creation, he has absolute power. You want to understand what I'm saying? Now, there's another thing which flows from this, and that's called Yichud V'Tzoynai. What does Yichud V'Tzoynai mean? Yichud V'Tzoynai means something very interesting. Yichud V'Tzoynai.
more like a puzzle.
Yeah, not really. An extension. Yichud Mitzvah means that the Bnei Shem is a being who, although we don't understand it, but we know that he has will. He has will. Now, his will is also existence. It's pure existence itself. We cannot understand. When the Bnei Shem wants something done, it must be done. Why? Since he is existence, his very wanting means it is automatically. Since he is the quality of ising itself, or being itself. If the Bnei Shem wants something, there is nothing that is possible to go against that will. You see, in any kind of sense. Since he has absolute power, his will is also absolute. Nothing can defy his will. Nothing. That's why Chazal say, "Ato es v'das k'Hashem lekim ein oid milvadoi." And herein lies the whole secret of the entire matter. Ein oid milvadoi. There is no one else but him. Right? Like it's very poetic. Ani Hashem, ani meimis v'ani machaya v'ein mi yodai matzil. There is no one but me. You see. B'shemayim v'oz v'oz v'tochas ein oid. Yodat ha'yom v'ashivas v'vacho b'shemayim v'oz v'tochas ein oid. There is no one else. What the Bnei Shem is saying, look, there's no one else but me. Nothing. There is no one else but me. What do you mean? There's no other Messiah but me. There is no control power but me. There's no will but mine. You see, everything exists because I allow it to be. That's the question. It's an extension. So Chazal say a very interesting thing. When you look at Chazal say, it says Ein oid milvadoi. So Chazal darshan afilu b'kshotim. What is kshotim? Kishuv. Kishuv is witchcraft, or the use of the koichos of Ra. You see, tumor like what do you call it? Bilam, right? Like Bilam. Okay, so the koichos of machashev magic, or they're really using the koichos of Ra. That's what it is, and so on and so forth, in that kind of sense. Now Chazal says afilu b'kshotim. Why? Because the truth is, where does the koich of Kishuv come from? Where does the koich of the Satan come from? Where? It comes from the Bnei Shem also. It must come from the Bnei Shem. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's yichud shvitas, yichud mitzvah. Even if you think that you can go connect his will by using a different power, you see, when we show him think that by using Kishuv, you can go connect the what's in Abori, it is not possible. If you do it, it's because he's maskim. He created the entire koyach called Kishuv, and he's masking to its use. You see what I'm saying? That's yichud mitzvah. Is it clear? They're separating, but you notice how it's built up here. Each one falls from the other. Now, finally, and this follows very well. Finally, the last concept, which what you followed. Okay, the last concept, which is the most important concept of all, as far as we are concerned, is called this. Yichud Hanagosa. What does that mean? What is Yichud Hanagosa? It means the following. This, we cannot understand the Yichud Mitzvah, really. We cannot understand how the Bnei Shem exists. No. We can only understand it indirectly. We cannot understand his power. There's no way we can interpret his koyach. We cannot understand his ultimate rotzen totally. But what we can understand totally, basically, is this. And I will say the following, to the degree that you understand that, this is the entire tachas of what a yid is. And to the degree that you understand Yichud HaNagosai, to that degree you're oiled higher and higher madregas of Yiras Shamayim. All Yiras Shamayim is built nothing more on the understanding of Yichud HaNagosai. What really is Yichud HaNagosai? Yichud HaNagosai means the following. You see, it means the following. And I'm going to give a very dramatic example. Yichud HaNagosai. Is the Bnei Shem good or is the Bnei Shem evil? The Bnei Shem is a toad. That is a fundamental aspect that is two of them. The Bunishim is a toiv. Okay? The Bunishim is toiv itself. Which means that his rotzen is to do good. Right? That's fundamentally what we know about the Bunishim. That he wants to do the toiv u'meitiv. He wants to do good to others. And that's why he created the entire Bria. That is why. We will not examine that now, we'll examine that later more closely. Now, we look at the world, for example. We look at the world and we see that there are a lot of things in the world which are not very good. You see. For example, we see World War II, and this is a dramatic thing. 6 million Jews died in World War II. Was that a toiv? Wait a minute, that's an incredible law. Right? There's no question about that. That's an incredible law. But wait a minute. Let's think for a second. You see, 6 million Jews died. If we say, you see, that he has yichud shlitasot, how can 6 million Jews die without him warning it? Therefore, that must have been his rotzen. Right? That was his rotzen. Now, if I say that his rotzen is toiv, is lehitiv, right? Where in heaven's name does such an incredible ma'asorah have any shaykhs lehitiv? Do you understand what I'm saying? Right? In the ancient world, it was very difficult for them to understand. They looked at the world and they saw different kinds of events. They saw there were good things that happened and there were bad things that happened. So they tended to look at the world in a dichotomy. Therefore, there's a God who's in charge of the good or the light, and there's a God who's in charge of the darkness. Right? Like the old Persian religion of Ahura Mazda and Ahriman. There are many religions that like that kind of thing and so on. There's a dichotomy or a dualism, minimally a dualism, at least minimally some. Why? Because when a person looks at his life, he sees that there are things in my life which are good and the things in my life which are bad. How can the same being be in charge of both? Can't be. So therefore there must be one being who's in charge of one and one in charge of the other. And these two beings are always fighting. So it depends on who's being Natseach. If the good God is winning over, right, then my life becomes good because he's the one who's showing it in the Bria. And if the bad God is being Menatzeach, duck. Right? It's essentially, that's essentially what it is. And a great deal of the ancient religions were built on that concept. But wait a minute. The Bunishim says to Yidden, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. I am one. There cannot be no other. There is nothing else but me. The only thing which truly exists is me, and the only thing which has true power is me. My will is the only thing which is real and which must be. You see, therefore, whatever happens to you is through me. There cannot be something else. There's nothing else but me. It must be me. You see. But then we look at the world and you say, wait a minute. This is good. This is bad. How could they both be coming from you? You see, that's what Yichud Hanhogoseh means. Hanhoga means the way you conduct the Bria, or the Hashkocha. It means that right now, the way we look at the world, it appears to be two different things. And I brought this down a very important example. The Gemara Bracha says that when you hear Besuras Tevis, when you hear something good, you make a bracha. You remember what the bracha is? Tevi HaMeitiv. If you hear something bad, some bad news, you also make a bracha. What's the bracha that you make? Dayan Emes. I ask you a kasha. The question that I ask is, what do you mean you make a bracha Dayan Emes? What are Chazal trying to do? Make us all into a bunch of apikosim? Why do I say that? Because Kol man Ovid Rachmana L'Tav Ovid. Right? Right? Whatever the Bunishim does is good. Isn't that true? So therefore, everything which happens, we should make a bracha to be a native. What? You understand what I'm saying? I mean, and an emes of mine says Torah Meitiv and everything. But don't you dare say Torah Meitiv on something which is bad. Because if you do, you're over Chazal. You can't make a bracha Torah Meitiv on something which is bad. It's also because the Chazal will masak in the bracha that you make on a Besuras law. Darkness can sadik Yosef die over here and make a Torah Meitiv. I might say, what do you mean? I believe that everything that the Bunishim does is Torah. The answer is, you may believe it, but you do not understand it. And therefore you do not understand it. You must harbor inner resentment. You see, and inner conflict about it. then you cannot truly make a bracha to the Ametim. Because as long as it's felt in das, as long as you cannot understand how such a thing is possible, you cannot be kavanah make a bracha on the thing. But at the same time, you can't say that, what do you call it, it's ra also. So you say dayan emes. That the bonishim is noig the bria according to Mishpah, according to din. What? You can't say gamma zulu teva, no, because you don't understand it. That's what Yichud Hanagorosa means. It means that in Olam Hazeh, right now, we look at the world and we see all the events. We see the Hashemah, we see all the events that happen in history. We cannot understand really clearly how the evil events that happen are really, not that they're really good, they look good, but they are good. They are ever the total hatova. We cannot understand it. How can something like that be hatova? How can pain be hatova? We cannot understand the concept. You see.
Oh well, you can say
what?
That's an objective description, whereas the bracha is an adjustment to God. And when you make a bracha, you ask Hashem to be mischaber to the bria in a certain way, and only according to the way I understand. Like on the phone, describing what you understand. You're not the guy, but a bracha is a form of
that's what it is.
And you're asking me to say
it's not like
in this case, I
but do you understand what I'm saying? You can't. But the truth of the matter is, you must understand. You see, the truth of the matter is this, and what you see, we will understand it someday. When in Yemais Mashiach, because it says everything will be understood one day. That's what it says. We will understand in Yemais Mashiach. You know what that means? That means we will understand how Yichud Mitzvah affects Yichud. We will understand, you see, how all the Hanogas which happen in the Bria were emes toiv. Right now we cannot understand it. Do you see what I'm saying? This is the basic concept. That's why in Yemais Mashiach there will no longer be a bracha dayan emes in the true tzur that we have it anymore. But this is for Yemais Mashiach. Now, why do I say this? Because you must remember, see, this thing I say, if the Bonishim is the only Rotzen which exists, and that Rotzen is Toiv, everything which happens must conform to that Rotzen. It must be a part of that Rotzen. If that Rotzen is Toiv, then even what we perceive to be evil must really, in its pneumius, be pure Toiv. You see what I'm saying? Because there's no way to deviate that. There is nothing else but Yichud Mitzvah. The Bonishim's rotten is and must be. You cannot deviate. Nothing else exists. There is nothing exists besides God. There's no other rotten that exists besides His. You see, everything which happens is His conformity is rotten. So how can there be an evil thing in the world? It cannot be. If His rotten is toiv, it's not shaykh for there to be an evil thing in the world as such. So obviously, what it is, it only appears to be evil. But the emphasis, it totally conforms with the what's in the Yichud Tzonai. The tachlis of the Torah, and the tachlis emphasis, we spoke before about why a person should learn Hashkafa, and what it means to learn Hashkafa and so on, this kind of thing, and in the beginning, is to reach this level of Yichud Hanagosai. Because you cannot be an Erech Yid, really, you cannot be an Emes Maimon until you understand more and more how everything comes from one Ratzon. That's the whole Torah. If you want to take the entire Torah, right, and put it on one zach, with all due respect to Hillel, on one thing, it rests on one concept. You see, Ato Horei Soladas, Ki Hashem Elokim Ein Oid Milvadoi. That's it. V'yodata Hayoim V'Hashavus Levacho. The essence, the icky idea that you must have, Bashamami Ma'alum Ra'ot Yikochas, Ein Oid. That's it. All your das of Torah, all your understanding of Hashkaf, everything must lead you to the understanding of how it's Einoi Bravadoi. That's the tachlis of a Yid. And that's the tachlis of the Bria itself. That is called, in more technical language, Hasagas Yehudoi. When I say the word Hasagas Yehudoi, it means to understand how everything which happens in the world, everything, every maisa, every deed is an aspect of His rotzen and had a tachlis which conforms to that rotzen. You see the thing? That's what it means Hasagas Yehudoi. And to the degree that you understand this, to the degree that you oimel and you're zoicha to understand these things, to that degree, you will be zurcha to a chelik in Olam Haba. Because you know what Olam Haba really is? Olam Haba, which we get on Olam Haba, is nothing more than different levels of Asad Sichudai. That's all it really is. We will explain this later on. Are there any questions?
If Hashem created a person with a Bechira, and he said that he can do Ra, so the person can do Ra and Messias, even though that's Mitzad Hashem, that's good because he gave Messias a choice. There is a Messias of Ra in the world.
Yes, there is a Messias of Ra in the world. There is. There's something called the Sifra Achwa, the Satan, and there is a true Messias of Ra. That is true. But it was also untrue. How does that fit? That's for later times. How is it possible? Because who made the Messias of Ra? The British himself. How could he have done that? But what we know clearly, you see, and you must realize that it will take you a while to understand what Yichud Tzona means. This is not a word, Yichud Tzona. You have to understand, we're talking about reality here. I'm not talking about ideas or wishful thinking. The Rotzen HaBoreh is reality. When the British says, I want, it is, by definition, just like he is, his Rotzen is. And if his Rotzen is Lehitiv, and that's only his Rotzen, everything must be good. So the shayla is, how can something be bad? That remains for us to understand. You see. But then what I'm saying? Ritzona is a Metzias. And that Metzias is absolute because it emanates from his Metzias, from his being. You see. Now you're right, there is something called the Metzias of Ra. But obviously, there's something wrong with that Metzias of Ra. Somehow that Metzias of Ra is not totally Ra, or there's something that has to be understood about that. We shall go on, into that later, in the future, how Ra was created and what it really is. You see. The final thing of Yichud, we'll take a break now. There's one more thing, the final thing which I brought examples and saw what Yichud Hanagosei also means. And it's really the pneumistic understanding also. When you, for example, the Bonishim says, I give you Bechira, do what you want. You can do either Tov or you can do Ra. Right? That's a Bechira. What you have to understand is that the truth of the matter is you cannot deviate from his Ratzon. Even when you do Ra, you are doing his Ratzon. You see. Even when you do Ra, it's more than his Mas Haskoma. No, even when you do evil, in a sense, that evil itself will also bring you to a certain level of Yeshua, in a certain sense. And what I mean is the following. For example, and I brought several examples, one to this. The brothers of Yosef and his brothers. Yosef came to them with a dream, right? And he said that I have a dream that there was like 11 or 12 sheaves bowing down to the sun and the moon, the stars, and they were bowing down to the sun, to the moon, I think what it was, and so they all bowed down. And of course, Yosef was implying that in some way they're going to all bow down to him. So the brothers said to him, what's going on over here? So they said, let's sell this person, Who does he think he is? What's Samin Gaivan does? Right? So they all picked themselves up and they sold Yosef. They sold him into slavery. Right? He was in slavery, he went to Egypt. What happened to him finally? What did he wind up? He wound up being the Mishnah Lamelech, right? They came along years later and they wound up being machniah to him, right? So in other words, they thought their kavanah was the Ra, but their ma'aser was toiv in a sense. Because the way that the dream was fulfilled was through their own ma'aser. They thought that they would frustrate the will of the Rebbeinu Shalom. They thought they would frustrate the dream, right? That's what they thought. They thought they'll sell with slavery and, it'll never happen that we're going to bow down to him. You see what I'm saying? But the very ma'aser which they did with that kavanah, one of the stories was the very way that it actually happened. Which means that even you think, for example, that you can go connected to Rosh Hashanah. You can go connected only in the sense that you can will to do bad. You can do bad and you can have a kavanah to do bad. That's true. But you cannot do an evil deed. It is not possible. You cannot do an evil deed. Everything that you do, what? Because you're nerach on your bechira. You're nerach on your bechira, on your rotten. What's that? The Bereshim decides whether or not he wants to let the Etzem Meiser go through or not. But in
other words, the Meiser itself fits into the time.
That's right. The Meiser, that's right, exactly. The Meiser itself fits in to the Bria, to the whole mechanism of Torah.
Do that, something else happens, something else.
But the Kavanah was, you're Nenash, even though you're Nenash in the Maisa, but you're not responsible for that Maisa in a sense. Well, more than, you're not really, what you're responsible is for the Bechira, or for the rotten Behira. The fact that you're Maisa means that the Baruch Hashem allowed you to do it. For example,
They'll funnel in a different way.
For example, and I'm not going to go into this, there's a much deeper thing because the truth is, we're going to later on when we go into the self. For example, let's say a person has a machshava to go kill somebody else, right? Now let me ask you something. Do you think that a person has the power to kill somebody else? You know what's involved in killing someone else? When someone walks over and kills someone, what happens to the nitzach? The nitzach is no longer an Elam Hazeh, right? Means you cut short his entire life, right? You cut short his entire ability to do mitzvahs, Torah mitzvahs, and become Elam Haba, right? Isn't that true? Do you think that does a person have the koyach to stop? No, of course, only the Baruch Hashem has the koyach to be geyser. That I want it stopped now. And as far as I'm concerned, the Baruch Hashem says, this person's opportunities or ability, you see, to be koyach Elam Haba is no more, it's finished. So the Baruch Hashem takes him away from the world. I see people that could go and murder other people. The answer is, you can't, no one can murder someone unless it's really migdal amayla that he'll be a mitzach. You see, you have a kind of the body to be a Ritzach, to kill. So the Baruch Hashem allows you to kill that who is already destined to die. You see what I'm saying? That's what happens. You see what happens? And then you learn it out, because it says, you learn it out. Nothing can happen to a person unless the Baruch Hashem is masculine.
Where's that Russian itself, that person should be dead? Where is that good?
How is that good?
Itself, that the person dies, where is that good?
That fits other chibbonos, which we won't go into. What I'm basically saying is that...
If the person had a Russian to kill someone, he didn't kill, he's not Nenash in the Russian. He's Nenash on the Esther Meister.
He's Nenash...
No,
he's Nenash on the Rotten. But the Rotten is not Nechshav, the Rotten. As far as halacha goes, it's not nechshav until the Baruch Hashem allows it to go to Maisa. It's the combination of two. You will see later on, not this week, you'll see later on that it is not possible for a person to kill someone. Because you'll see later on that if you have no shaykhs to Maisa. But we won't talk about that. Hold one second. I don't want to go into this really, we will go into this depth later on. All I'm basically saying is, Yichud Mitzrayim or Yichud Hanagosa means that fundamentally nothing happens in the world unless it submits itself to Baruch Hashem's haskama, and it submits itself to His plan. You see, it only appears that we have free will only in terms of will. We have free will in that sense. It appears that we could do whatever we want to His bria. You see, it is not true. The bria follows along the plan that He wants.
So what is the bria?
What? The bechira is whether or not you will do something evil or good. That's something else. But whether or not it will be allowed to come into fruition depends on whether Baruch Hashem will allow it. Many times the person has a machshava raw and it never comes to pass. It never comes. The Baruch Hashem frustrates this machshava. You see, and sometimes the Baruch Hashem allows it to come to pass. Why? The Baruch Hashem has a different cheshbon and so on. But you cannot affect reality at all unless the Baruch Hashem allows you to affect it. So in essence, what you really have control over is only on your will, not on your deed. But your will is not nenash until the deed happens. In halacha, you see.
But you have a very ironic situation because you come.
But see, you tried to kill somebody, right? So as far as you're concerned, what you just said, it's the same thing as whether you did it or not.
No, it's not. You have to go through a certain mysterious nefesh. You have to go through the amola of the rotten as well. That's why you've got to do the amola of the thing and be masliach at a certain point. And that's right. But I don't want to go...
Why is the Kosh Baruch Hu only start Machshav Taiva in there?
What's that?
Why is the Kosh Baruch Hu only start? Only the Machshav Taiva is something that you get. Why should somebody not have the same... If he did the mice, even if he doesn't do the mice, he still gets schar. But if he doesn't do the mice, when he had a Machshav Ra, he doesn't get... That's not considered against him.
Well...
If he was only frustrated, you could only be punished for your up, and not for the mice, and that's not Kosh Baruch Hu's mice, not yours.
In order to have, I really, the truth of it is, we can go into this more at length, and we really can't go into this specific area here until you understand a whole different parsha about what the person really is, the concept of a self, the concept of will. There are a lot of other things that you really have to understand before you see this. And that's what we go into, it really involves other kind of concepts. So, but save your question, okay? But it's a good question. Why is he mitzvah one thing and another and so on? All I'm basically saying You see, which is the basic reality is that a person can only affect those things in reality which the Rebbeinu will allow him to affect. You see, where the person is being held responsible, where he's not being held responsible, that's something else. But these are much more complex questions when we get later on to the aspect of Bechira. I don't want to go into that now, but I simply want to see the four basic concepts that we have, that we understand when we understand what we can understand about the Rebbeinu. Okay? Last week was a very difficult topic. We covered it in a relatively short period of time, which is an hour, which we discussed what is it possible, what can we know, what could a person know about the nature or the Messias of the Rebbeinu Shalom, which of course is a very difficult thing, and it's not a topic really to be treated lightly. It is very abstract, and it's very difficult. And the reason why it's very abstract is because the key idea was that most people are not trained to think along a certain line, which in order to understand something about the Messias of the Rebbeinu Shalom, you must think along that line. If you don't think along the line, then you are extremely distant from ever understanding even what you can understand. And essentially what we said the central line was that, without going into it, that the key point is that everything in the world, everything which exists, is composed of two things. It has what's called an essence, which is the central idea which defines the thing. Those are the characteristics which make it to be what it is. For example, like we said, a tape recorder is a device which can reproduce sound. That's its essence. Those are the characteristics which define what it is. You know, and so on. A pencil is something which can reproduce certain visual marks on the board, which constitute symbols or something like that. So each thing has a certain essence. In addition to the essence, it also possesses existence. It happens to be. It exists. And what we said was that everything in the world that we look at is always composed of these two things. And the Rebbeinu Shalom is not composed of these two things. Rather, the Rebbeinu Shalom, in the way that we know it, rather the Rebbeinu Shalom is equivalent to the concept of existence itself. He's not an essence which possesses existence. Rather, existence in this case is the essence itself. Existence is the entity that we're talking about. Whatever pure existence is, whatever it means to be, that's actually his Messias. That's actually him. That's his idea. That's not his Messias. It's not. We don't say the Rebbeinu Shalom exists. That there's something called the Rebbeinu Shalom, which is an idea. It means that he's, like I said, he's all powerful. He's all knowing. He has many characteristics which he defined as a God, belong to a God. And we don't. And saying that God exists. That they're two separate concepts. You see. Rather, what you find is that they're really one concept. Forget about the concept forget about the essence that you see, but rather think of the word existence. And this is very difficult for most people. Because like I say, in the world itself, we always think, the mind naturally tends to understand something which exists. There's always a something. And the mind instantly goes into that something first. You see. And then it understands that it exists. What we have to do is to forget about that something, but rather go straight to the concept or the word existence itself. And think that this word existence, whatever it represents, is the Rebbeinu Shalom. You see, now that's, like I say, that's not an easy thing to think of, but that's essentially what it is. And since he is existence itself, that is him, that's his idea. Nobody ever made him, or could make him, because you cannot bring being into existence. You cannot bring existence into existence. The very fact that something is existence means that it is. It cannot be brought into existence. Existence means that it is and it therefore must be. That's what we mean when we say that the Rebbeinu Shalom exists necessarily. He must exist. The reason why he must exist is because he is existence itself. That is him. So once we say that, then he's a different type of being than any other type of being that we can understand. This instantly leads us to the idea of what's called Yechudoi or Hasagas Yechudoi. Hasagas Yechudoi means that the Rebbeinu Shalom is one, but one in a way that none of us are one. Now again, we explained that last week, that the Rebbeinu Shalom is, when we say the Rebbeinu Shalom there is one God, we mean that there is not a possibility of another. Whereas if we say that there's one object, there is always a possibility of another. To say Hashem Echad means that there's not a possibility of another God. Why not? Because existence is so fundamental. You cannot have two things. You can have two things which exist, but you cannot have two existences. Because existence is the most simple thing there is. It means to be. There cannot be two of to be, if that's what he is, you see. So therefore there cannot be another one. So we said basically that this points to the concept of Yichud Mitziyosoi. He is one. He is one because of the fact that he is pure existence itself. Therefore, he must be one. He has no beginning and he has no end. There was never time that he wasn't, because it's not possible. Existence by definition always is. It must be. It is. And there will never be a time that he won't be. You see. In addition, we also say that since he is one, Ein Oid Milvado, he has an absolute oneness, therefore he has what's called Yichud Shlitasoi. He has absolute control. He is a true monarch or a true melech. Because a true melech means he has true power. Power that everything which is brought into existence later on must yield to him, or rather is dependent on him, because they take their existence from him. So therefore, since everything must come on to him for their existence, everything is subject or submits to his power or his control, and it is not possible to go out of his control. Number 3, we said that he has what's called Yichud V'Tzoynoi, that whatever his will is, however you define it, it must be. There cannot be another will against it. It's not that it cannot be, not that there can be another will, but no will couldn't ever be victorious against the Bnei Shalom. We don't say that. There cannot exist another will besides his. There cannot exist another will or another Ratzon to say, I don't want to do what he says. It's not possible unless he allows it. Because since he is pure existence itself, his will must be. We'll get into that later. And then finally we said that his Ratzon, which in this case happens to be Hatova, we'll get that more into today, which is Hatova, is such that it manifests to everything which exists in the world. If the Bnei Shalom's Ratzon, and it is to be Meisiv, then everything which happens in the Bria after him, you see, everything which came into existence is a direct reflection of that Hatova. And there's no such thing as true evil as such, or evil which has its own existence in any way. Everything must stem from his Ratzon. Therefore, everything ultimately conforms to his Ratzon, even though it's absolutely hidden from our eyes. Those are the 4 basic principles. Yichud Mitziyosoi, the absolute unity of his existence. Yichud Shlitasoi, his absolute power, or his ability to do whatever he wants to do. Yichud V'Tzoynoi, that his will is absolute. It is the only will which can be really. And finally, his Hanhoga, Yichud Hanhogosoi, that anything which follows from his will, every ma'aseh which he does, must be a direct reflection of that will. And even though it appears to be a contradiction, like Toiv and Ra, it's really one manifestation of good, since that's the only will there is. Okay. We'll leave that subject. We have, like, anyone who wants to go into more deeply, we have the tapes from the Shurim, which we have to, as soon as we must produce that, we have to get on that, to speak to you about it. And you can listen to it. It's really a 2-hour share more. It's a 2-hour. I think you spent 2 shurim on that. 1 share and maybe a little piece of another, working it out to try and understand what it means that he is existence. You see, it's a very strange thing. Many times a person can say, "I think I know what it is," or "I really understand it," and he does not understand it. It's that kind of concept. It's a very strange thing. It is that kind of concept that a person can actually think he understands it and really not begin to understand it. Because it's something which a person can understand intellectually to someone, but when you really understand it, it's a different kind of thing. You really begin to feel, to some extent, what the Messias of Bnei Shalom is in terms of how powerful he really is. But that it takes time. One has to work on that a while, because it's an abstraction and so on. And the tape should help. Today, what we will go into is the second important thing, which is the tachlis of the Bria. Once we understand to some extent what the Bnei Shalom is, we have an idea of what we can understand about his Messias. The second most important question is, why did he create everything? What's the whole? Why did he create the world? In any sense, why do we ask that question? The world is here. Well, the answer is very basic. Since he is pure existence itself, he is perfect. There's nothing outside of him, or nothing lacking from him. Therefore, he doesn't need this world. He doesn't need any of us. He doesn't need anything in this world whatsoever. So therefore, why is it here? Many people think, although they don't admit it to themselves, they think, many people, and it's a childish concept, You see, it's something which is started from childhood and it remains in adulthood. For most people, it's the strange thing. Most people really think that the Baruch Shem is like a big man, or Superman, or a Superman. You know, he's Superman, if you want to call it that today. What do I mean? It means that the Baruch Shem has certain kinds of behavior patterns, certain kinds of characteristics and so on, and he behaves in a certain way. This is not true. What we understand is the Baruch Shem has no shaykhs to what he really is. And this we'll get into more deeply later on. One of the things that we think is that in some way he needs us, or else why would he make us? You don't do a thing unless it is important for your being in some way that it actualizes you, or it satisfies you, or it satisfies some kind of need, or whatever have you. So we say, well, why did the Baruch Shem create the entire Bria? For the same reason. In some way he needs us, you see. But from what we said last week, and which is very clear, it's obvious the Baruch Shem doesn't need us. So then you would say, so then why does he make us daven to him 3 times a day? And so on and so forth. Why is he concerned? Why is the Baruch Shem concerned that we should daven to him? So, and if you read what do we say to him? What do we daven? We daven to him, we give him shrochas, so on and so forth. There are many shrochas that we give him. And we say to ourselves, why do we give him these shrochas for? He sounds like, he really wants this. Now, normally in human experience, when you know in human experience that somebody wants to hear good about himself, he really needs praise, the normal feeling is, well, like, he's on an ego trip, or something like that. Or he needs it for his own self, his confidence, his approval, and so on. And the truth is that if you really think, if you look at the davening, and all these things saying, if you were davening to this to a Apostle of Adam, you think that this person was like, whatever, some kind of a megalomaniac or something like that. If you're really honest with yourself, if you look at the davening and say, what's going on over here? What does the Baruch Shem need me to sit there and say shlochas the whole day? It's a very strange kind of, it's almost, within humans' social activities, it is an abnormal context, really. And we all know about these absolute monarchs, these emperors, who have to think that they're God or divine beings, and they demand allegiance and all kinds of praise to them continuously all day long. Well, if you still look at the davening, it seems to be that the Baruch Shem needs our praise in some way. Now, this is absolutely false. Why is this absolutely false? From what we said last week. Because if the Baruch Shem is pure existence, we cannot even begin to understand the nature of that Messias. Anything we say about him must be an absolute lie. It must be an absolute lie, you see. Because the human mind cannot understand a sentence where the subject and the verb are the same word. You see. What I mean, for example, if I have a sentence, and we said this very briefly last week, if I have a sentence, Chaim runs. I have said Chaim runs. There are 2 things in that statement. There's Chaim, who's a subject, and runs is a verb. It tells me what Chaim is doing. Now, let's take a more fundamental sentence. Chaim is. Well, that's very fundamental. But again, there's still a subject and there's a verb. There's Chaim and there's is. The fact that he is. One is the verb and one is the noun, or one is the subject. That's how we speak. Now, from what we've said before, this follows the following pattern. Chaim is some kind of individual who's conceptualized in our minds. That's an essence. That's an idea. The idea of Chaim, you see, which is different than anyone else. Of Reuven, Yisachar, Zvulun, it's different than all this. Chaim is a person with a certain essence in our mind. Now, we say Chaim is. It means that he happens to possess existence. He is. You see what I'm saying? Now, if I say the same thing, now that is expressed, therefore, as a noun and as a verb, as a subject and a verb. You have the noun or the subject, what you're talking about, in this case, the mahus or the essence, and the fact you're predicating something of him, you're saying some kind of verbal action. He is. They're 2 separate words. But to Baruch Shem, if you say God is, it sounds strange. That's not true, in a sense. Because God is means there's something called God, which is an essence, and He is, He possesses existence. As if the 2 things were separate. But they're not separate, because what we said before, that God and the is are the same thing. So the subject and verb merge into one word. But that's not possible. The human mind cannot conceive of something, a subject and a verb, which is the same thing. You see, in the human mind you have a subject, which then is subject to a verb. Whatever verb that is. You see what I'm saying? Therefore, we cannot even express him. There is no word in the English language will even express what he is. So therefore, when you sit and you daven all day long, you say absolutely lies. These are lies about him. You see? Do you understand what I'm saying? When you say the Baruch Hashem is a Chacham, that's an absolute lie. Because he's not a Chacham. The Baruch Hashem is the essence of Chachma. He and Chachma are one. Chachma is not separate from him. Since he is pure existence, all his qualities are him. Because all qualities exist. So therefore, they all are him. He and his qualities are the same thing. We cannot understand what kind of Messiah is that, he and his qualities are the same being. That's not, we cannot be touched at that kind of a Messiah. So therefore, when you say the Baruch Hashem is the biggest Chacham of all, this is the biggest insult you can say. But he's not the biggest Chacham of all. He has no shaykhs to the Chachma the way we understand it. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? Therefore, all your tefillahs are absolute shkom. The only tefillah that you can really say that's totally true of the Baruch Hashem is to say nothing. Like this. Because to say nothing is the only emes of him. To say nothing means that you have no assumption. You cannot describe what he is or what he's about in any word. So when you say nothing, this is a total emes. This is the only emes of tefillah. What? So therefore, the fact that you can daven is a reshut that the Baruch Hashem gave you. He's matter you to say absolute lies about him. Now that sounds like a strange contradiction. Why would he do that? The answer is because he's matter you to be tefus him to the highest extent that you can. And since we cannot be tefus his real essence, what he really is, we can only understand him in human terms, but in much greater than human terms. He said, it's mutalach for you to describe me in those terms. But this is your das. This is not me. You see? And therefore, we see that all the tefillahs are not true. We said to some extent, last week we tried to describe it, when we said, if you take a water bug, for example, a water bug, can a water bug understand what a chimpanzee is? No. Can a water bug, because whatever that is, whatever that mind is, it's an animal, so it's very extremely primitive, whatever that is, can a water bug understand what a chimpanzee is? No, it's not possible. Can a chimpanzee understand what a person is? No, it's out of the realm of his entire hasaga. There's nothing that he can even madama a human being to. A chimpanzee looks at a human being and he understands, like an iceberg, the tip of something. When 90% is under the water and 10% is on top, the chimpanzee understands 1 billion of what a mahus, of what an adam can really be. Because he cannot understand what it means to think. In those terms, it's a different existential plane. Same thing, a water bug or a spider cannot begin to understand what a chimpanzee is. An amoeba, which is a one-celled animal, or a bacteria, for example, cannot understand what a spider is. Go talk to a bacterium and explain him what a spider is. You see, whatever he's capable of, it's beyond his existence. In the same way, you are beyond the Baruch Hashem. The Baruch Hashem is beyond your ken. You see. So what am I saying all this for? To demonstrate very clearly that the Baruch Hashem doesn't need you, he doesn't need your tefillahs, and he is not on an ego trip. You know, it sounds funny, like why, you know, chas v'sholom. How a person can understand such a chas v'sholom, and understand why that's not true. But in truth, before we can discuss what the purpose of creation was, why the Baruch Hashem created the world, it is still necessary for us to understand some more critical principles about the nature of the Baruch Hashem's existence. And this we shall do shortly.